All right, well, let's get started. Um, let's get started. So I'm just going to put up on the screen this little piece I think we used last week. Does it say you are invincibly precious? Okay. Yeah, so we'll start with a little silence, and just briefly, we can remember that a practice of silent prayer or meditation is a consent to the truth of these two sentences, and I'll just focus on the first one. It's a consent to the truth, and a lot of us in our egoic consciousness don't really like this truth because we're programmed to earn our belovedness or our preciousness. Like Brian said, you quoted Brian Marilla. That's really great. I want to check a bunch of boxes and then feel worthy of being precious. But the great and marvelous condescension of the Creator is that we are invincibly preciousness even in our brokenness. And I often add to that. This is my little twist, probably because it's probably something about me, especially in our brokenness. And I think I have license for that addition. Because as a parent, and if you're not a parent, then you're an aunt or an uncle or a godparent, or you just really adore the kids at church or in the neighborhood. As a parent, I find that when my kids are trying their hardest and not succeeding, and then trying again and not succeeding, and then I can see that they're probably not going to succeed, and whatever it is they're trying at, it's not going to come out how they want it to. There's something that gets tapped into deep in the sort of wellspring of my own heart that makes them especially precious. And there's an invincibility to that preciousness as it resides in me for them. If we dare to think that that's extra biblical, all we have to do is go back to the story of Cain, and there you are. There you are. So, in this silence, I'll hold us in 2 minutes. We just consent, like it or not, to the invincibility of our preciousness in the midst of our brokenness, in the eyes and heart of God. So now the silence after the scripture which says, "Be still and know that I am God." And now I'll say the Lord's Prayer slowly as you emerge gracefully from the silence. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. All right. So we are let's see, Kathy, we were going to pick up with something. It was let's see. Was it say it again?
It was going to be, if I'm not mistaken, Matthew 6, 1 through 8, on the alms. The thing in the book we're reading to go with it was about being seen and giving alms.
Right, that's what's appointed for today. But I thought at the end of last time, did I dream this? We said, can we start with love your enemies or something? Pick up the last piece of the extensions?
Right, probably, yes.
We didn't get that far, but then when I read this part, I thought, oh, good, he's going to talk about money today. So I don't want to take any time away from that.
Well, we can have our cake and eat it too. We can let's try to do it all.
I asked that because it's just so darn hard. That's a really hard one.
The love your enemies one? Yeah. Let's see. I want to do something real quick. Let's see. Today is Tuesday. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Okay. Yeah, so we can talk about love your enemies. We can talk about piety and money. We can do all of that. Something's happened with me. I've got a hard stop at 10 till 9. That doesn't usually happen to me on Tuesdays, but it's happening today. But that still leaves us plenty of time. I'm not worried. I just need to say that out loud so I'll remember it. So we'll pick up. Again, we're in the Sermon on the Mount. For those who are on Facebook or listening to recording later, we're in the Sermon on the Mount. The passage appointed in our study schedule for today is, as Marilla said, chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. Takes us right up to the Lord's Prayer. But last week we talked about the extensions, sort of last part of chapter 5, and we got carried away with, I don't know, adultery or anger or something, and we sort of didn't get a chance to dive into love your enemies. So I think we can pick up with love your enemies and then get into money and piety. But I actually want to back up a little further first and talk about hell for just a second. Doesn't that sound fun? So the reason I want to talk about hell is because the lectionary Old Testament reading appointed for today in the daily lectionary has got a really neat little few sentences that are almost like the evolution of hell. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to take a quick look at Jeremiah. Heaven knows where this will lead us, Kathy, but we'll see what happens. Let me share my screen here. And for those who can't share my screen, I'll give you the Bible reference in just a second. All right. So we're looking at the Old Testament prophet Jeremiah, chapter 7, verses 21 through 34. So Zoom, folks, is that what I've got on the screen right now? Okay. All right. Yeah, so Jeremiah is one of the two big, long prophets in the Old Testament. Isaiah and Jeremiah are sort of your prophetic rock stars in the Old Testament. And the prophets will speak lovingly, but boy, they also love to chastise. So they're like preachers who are taking the people to task on God's behalf for the disobedience and the bad behavior of the people. That's my paraphrase. They're rather unapologetic about it. You want to know the truth, go talk to a prophet, and it's kind of like if you're into 12-step work, if you want a good solid step 4 and step 5, go see a prophet. They will wear you out. For others, if you want to just look in the mirror and get self-reflective and see the truth about your naked character defects, go talk with a prophet. If you don't want to see these things, please steer clear of the prophets, because they will show you win, lose, or draw what's up. So Jeremiah is recorded, is reflecting on events that are sort of recorded around, early 7th century BC. So we're talking, 624, 25, 26, something like that, before, BC, before the Common Era, before Christ. So what's happened in the life of Israel historically is that they've been conquered and taken into exile. Now I'm giving you a gloss because Jeremiah was actually collected over several generations, and it's not just one author, it's Jeremiah and then some of his disciples after he dies and all this kind of stuff. But suffice it to say, in the sort of this story narrative, the people have been making idols and sort of veering from the path of worshiping and being in communion with the one true God. And so the prophet says, y'all are messing up. So I'm going to read this. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, add your burnt offerings to your sacrifices and eat the flesh. For on the day that I brought your ancestors out of the land of Egypt, I did not speak to them or command them concerning burnt offerings and sacrifices. This is the command I gave them. Obey my voice, and I will be your God, and you will be my people, and walk only in the way that I command you, so that it may be well with you. Yet they did not obey or incline their ear. But in the stubbornness of their evil will, they walked in their own counsels and looked backwards rather than forwards. So right there, it's a little poetic, but it's really kind of easy to understand. Does that sort of make sense? I mean, especially at the end of that, very, very clearly has God saying, this is the sort of relationship I drew up. I was going to be your God. You were going to be my people. You're just going to obey my voice and walk in my way. And you've chosen to hold your own counsel and walk in your own way. The beginning of it, I really like. It's so sassy. It says, it's basically God saying, put everything in a pile and eat it. I don't care anymore. All your liturgical finery, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, incense, whatever you want to call it, put it in a pile and eat it all. I'm over it. All right, so pick up at 25. From the day that your ancestors came out of the land of Egypt until this day, I have persistently sent all my servants, the prophets, to them day after day. Put another way, I've been trying to tell y'all that you're not doing it right. Yet they did not listen to me or pay attention. I've given you chance after chance after chance. At my house, we have children, 3 strikes, baby. That's 1 strike, that's 2 strikes. I'm telling you, you're about to have 3rd strike, TV's gone. But they stiffened their necks. They did worse than their ancestors did. Isn't this great hyperbole? I mean, they're just really taking them to task. 27. So you shall speak all these words to them, but they will not listen to you. You shall call them, but they will not answer you. God's saying, basically, I'm telling you, these people are done. They're not going to listen to you. You shall say to them, this is the nation that did not obey the voice of the Lord their God, and did not accept discipline. Truth has perished. Does that sound contemporary or what? It is cut off from their lips. Cut off your hair and throw it away. Raise a lamentation on the bare heights, for the Lord has rejected and forsaken the generation that provoked his wrath. For the people of Judah have done evil in my sight, says the Lord. And Judah is the name of the sort of little tribe of God's chosen of Israel. At this point in history, they've sort of separated into different little tribes within the big tribe, and Judah's one of them. You've done evil in my sight, says the Lord. They've set their abominations in the house that is called by my name, defiling it. And they go on building the high place of Topheth. Okay, here we go. which is in the valley of the Son of Henam, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I did not command, nor did it come into my mind. I didn't even think of this, he's saying. Therefore the days are surely coming, says the Lord, when it will no more be called Topheth, or the valley of the Son of Henam, but the valley of slaughter. For they will bury in Topheth until there is no more room. The corpses of this people will be food for the birds of the air and for the animals of the earth, and no one will frighten them away. And I will bring to an end the sound of mirth and gladness, the voice of the bride and bridegroom in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem, for the land shall become a waste. Okay, check this out. So I read this morning. I was like, oh man, this is so cool. This is a narrative demonstration of the evolution of our concept of hell. So go to here. They go on building the high place of Topheth. Now, historically, Topheth was a place, rather a kind of a pagan or a secular place where the ancients sacrificed children to a god whose name we think might have been Moloch. And some historians say, they were literally sacrificing children, and others say they were going through this liturgy that was a dramatization of sacrificing children. But it was somehow something that was violent, liturgically violent with children to a God who is not Yahweh. Does that make sense? So it was idolatry writ large to a really terrible extent. This place, Topheth, was in a place that came to be called the Valley of the Son of Henam. Now, Henam was a family name of some ancient family, and the family owned the valley. And it came to be not associated with the family particularly, but the family name became the name of the valley. So other people inhabited it, owned it, didn't own it, whatever, and it was just named the Valley of the Son of Henam. Which, if you think about our culture here in the United States, there's tons of things that are named after people that are not any longer owned by the people, right? So it's just sort of standard stuff. Now, Henam, when you translate, I'm going to be close on this. If you talk to Christian Brady, he says he's a little off, I can accept that because I'm going to be close. Henam becomes in the Greek, by the time it gets to Greek, Gehenna. The word Gehenna. Gehenna is, when it comes to English, becomes the word hell, right? Jesus never spoke the word hell because he didn't speak English. Jesus very likely never spoke the word Gehenna because he didn't speak Greek. But the New Testament was recorded in Greek. So Jesus, whether he spoke Hebrew or Aramaic, we likely think he day-to-day spoke Aramaic. His word, which was likely some derivation, again, we should check with Christian on the Aramaic, he knows Aramaic, I don't, was something around Hinnom, or Valley of Hinnom. And then we just translated it in the Greek, and there's nothing wrong with this, in the New Testament, in the earliest incarnation of it, to Gehenna. So what I think is so cool is when we're reading the Sermon on the Mount, and we go to chapter 5, verse 30, in the extension concerning adultery, and Jesus says, and if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. And because we're contemporary American Westerners, Christians, which is not bad, we're Dante basically gave us our sense of hell. And so we immediately make some associations, just according to our contemporary context, when we read that word hell in the New Testament. But I've spent, maybe 7 minutes, I'm not sure, unpacking this 2,500-year-old prophetic text from our tradition and given a little crash course in the evolution of the word hell. And it gives us a whole different context, doesn't it? One of the things contextually it does, and I don't want to disarm it. I don't want to disarm it at all. I don't want to disarm the anger of God. I mean, who am I? I don't want to disarm the teaching of Jesus. All I want to do is give it its appropriate context. So maybe actually what we're doing is rearming it with some appropriate power. So what we're doing is we're going back to this prophetic text, and we're seeing the authentic anger of God expressed in the hyperbole of the prophet. And hyperbole is not dismissive. It's a pedagogy, right? It's a way to communicate. And I think you see the hyperbole really can you say beautifully about hell, but sort of beautifully articulated in these verses here, verses Jeremiah 7:31 through 34. And you can see, I think what I see in it is there are some hellish consequences for my misbehavior, right? But because I know the rest of the story, I know that actually the people were not written off. By the way, we're the people, right? This is our lineage. We're not written off. Our corpses were not abandoned to be consumed by the ravens and the wild animals. What happened is, finally, isn't this gorgeous? Jesus came. What happened is, finally, the infancy narrative of the Christ, Emmanuel, as Matthew says, God with us, born in a manger, not in a throne room, into the midst of the disobedience that Jeremiah is taking the people to task for, in the midst of the earthy brokenness of all humanity. We're not finally abandoned. I'll put it this way, I'll put it very traditionally, we're rescued, you know? And what happens is the most important theological word in Christianity, incarnation. What happens is God joins us in the mess, you know? And so, as for mature folks like you all are, who are working on sort of integrating all of the stages and teachings of your own lives and of all of humanity, that's a big job, isn't it? We can probably, if not fully, begin to appreciate the need to be taken to task and to be threatened in the sort of way that Jeremiah is, with hell itself. I think a right understanding of the derivation of that image, that hell image, is just so helpful, because it turns us into the refining fire of self-reflection and turns us away from Jim and Hendry are going to hell because they don't believe homosexuality is a sin, you know, or whatever. Pick your poison, right? Yeah, I think that's what I have to say about that. So thoughts, comments on that, and no, let's actually not do that. Let's not do that. Let's do this first, Jim, and then you start us off. Let's read this. Let's read the sermon through 6 and 8, and then Jim, you start us off. We'll talk about hell, enemy love, money, and piety. Lee, will you start us off and read the Beatitudes?
Sure.
Thomas, have you got the text there?
I do, but since I missed last week, I'm not 100% sure where we are.
You're great. Will you read for us Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16?
Got it.
And then, Kathy, will you read the extensions for us? So that long section we did last week? Yep.
And that goes through what?
The end of chapter 5. So it picks up at 17 and goes to the end of chapter 5. And then Marilla, will you read the passage appointed for today, which is 6, 1 through 8? Okay. So we'll read it. This will be our custom, is we're going to read everything that's come before. Then we'll talk about hell, enemy love, money, and piety. So Lee, you can kick us off.
When Jesus saw his ministry drawing huge crowds, he climbed a hillside. Those who were apprenticed to him, the committed, climbed with him. Arriving at a quiet place, he sat down and taught his climbing companions. This is what he said. You're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there is more of God and his rule. You're blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. You're blessed when you're content with just who you are. No more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that can't be bought. You're blessed when you've worked up a good appetite for God. He's food and drink and the best meal you'll ever eat. You're blessed when you care. At the moment of being careful, you find yourselves cared for. You're blessed when you get your inside world, your mind and heart put right. Then you can see God in the outside world. You're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family. You're blessed when your commitment to God provokes persecution. The persecution drives you even deeper into God's kingdom. Not only that, count yourselves blessed every time people put you down or throw you out or speak lies about you to discredit me. What it means is that the truth is too close for comfort and they are uncomfortable. You can be glad when that happens. Give a cheer even, for though they don't like it, I do. And all heaven applauds. And I know that you are in good company. My prophets and witnesses have always gotten into this kind of trouble.
You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven.
Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go first, be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the grounds of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, where you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
Thank you. Yep.
Sorry. Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So, whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. When you are praying, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him.
All right. Thank you, all of you. So what in any of that, hell, loving enemies, or today's passage, or anything in Amy Jill Levine's book, emerges for you? Gives you hope, raises a question, gives you pause, concern. What's in there?
This is probably somewhat pretty obvious now, and it might have been in Levine's treatment of this, and I have not read it for this particular part, but I never really thought of it this way, but it's kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a remix almost of the 10 Commandments, it feels like to me. And he says it pretty obviously in there. I just had never picked up on that before until reading it again today. That it seems like a very, very much a parallel to the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, nice, Thomas. Amy Jill Levine calls them extensions.
Okay.
Extending those early teachings, yeah.
Doesn't Rohr say it's second half of life, 10 Commandments?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, sure.
Need the structure in the first half. This is now the mystery.
Yeah, builds out sort of the center of it.
Since I have trouble with the love your enemies part, I was just going to point out, I liked what she said on kind of the middle of page 52.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the problem I have with, love my enemies is I think of loving my children. Of course, I love my children a lot. And then I think of enemies, and then I try to think, well, maybe I need to love them in the same way, but maybe I don't. I mean, maybe that's the problem, is thinking about love. But in the middle of 52, she says, he instructs, act the way God would act as if you fully recognize that your enemy is also in the image and likeness of God.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm called to do? Not to like take presents to my enemies or.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Does that make any sense?
It does to me, and I think you're picking out really nicely that succinct line on 52 that really captures it. I mean, yeah, we're not going to love our enemies, so-called, like we love our children, to use your example. It's just, but a starting place to realize that everybody is made in the image and likeness of God, and everybody's beloved of God, and then to sort of move into that contemplative stance of, God, I really struggle with John Doe, but I believe that you love John Doe, so would you dare to love John Doe through me? And what does that look like, you know? I often think also, don't start with the hard ones. Like, don't start with trying to love, Hitler and bin Laden, depending on your political persuasion. Don't start by trying to love the sort of celebrity politician on the opposing side. Like, don't start there. Start with that person at your office that irritates the fool out of you, or that in-law or that whomever. Start easier. Start snowball effect.
I love what Amy Jo Levine says in the fact that everyone is made in the image of God, because you can instantly see kind of there, just like you're talking about in the Stones, there's your common ground, there's getting to know the person.
Yeah.
So that's the starting point, whereas if you start with the issue, which is probably the reason why someone is your enemy, rather than knowing them and knowing that they're God's love is I picked up on, thought was cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, John. Yeah.
What's helped me a lot with that, not that I've made all that progress with it.
So I'll see if I can't fix that.
But is what you said, Henry, about hurt other people. And I've seen, just sort of what you said, some people who, this is more before the lockdown, but some people at Good Shepherd who sort of irritate me, and none of you are in that group, by the way. but I just said, but instead of seeing them as irritating, I can often see the tension in them, the hurt in them.
Yeah.
And when you understand that, there may be some inappropriate reactions where they don't pay attention to what you said, or slight something, or speak too sharply or harshly or something. But when you see, they're suffering, and this is how it's spilling out, or how what's making them miss something, it's very different. And that's been very helpful to me.
Yeah.
Sorry, was someone else speaking?
No,
Kathy started out by saying, I don't think I can love my enemies like I love my children. And I feel the same way. But then I think, but God loves my enemies because they're God's children. And then that gets me thinking about, how can God do that? I mean, then I start sounding like the prodigal son, the brother, I guess, that stays home. But
that's great.
That's what really bugs me about loving my enemies. I hate to say it, but it's that God actually loves them as God's children.
Yeah.
I don't get that.
Yeah. Oh, what a beautiful insight. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a very different translation of the Bible, the New English, the Oxford Study, and so often I find that I can't follow along when people are reading, and so I just listen. And that this morning, I kind of got the sort of bigger picture of this thing, or just hearing it versus reading it. I thought, man, I can't do any of this. I can't do any of this. And there isn't anything in here that I haven't done wrong. Pretty much, I mean, I could check the boxes for all the bad stuff I've done. And so where does that leave me? What I sort of felt this morning is I'm done. I can't do this. And I don't think Jesus meant to go up there and be wagging his finger at everybody. Do this and don't do that. Do this and don't do that. The fact is, I can't do any of it perfectly. I am incapable. I've already proven that in my life. And so where does that leave me? And I'll just tell you, Kathy talking about I can't love my enemies like I love my children. And, I have a very difficult child that has been the thorn in my flesh. And thanks to the 12 steps, a whole lot of Al-Anon, I've not lost my mind. But I've also been able to do the inventory work on a lot of this. And here's the horrible, beautiful truth I have found and need to remember at times about my relationship with my son is that I discovered I do not love him unconditionally, that there are conditions on my love for him. And the conditions are you'll do what I say, you'll live your life in the way I expected you to, and then I will love you. What I found in this critical self-examination is that I don't love perfectly. My own child, I don't love and this is a child that forever this is something I've loved more than anything in my whole life, and I don't do it perfectly. So I can't do any of this stuff. I'm not capable. So I don't know where it leaves me, but that's where I am. It's like I feel like I feel grateful in a way that I know I can't do this. I cannot do any of it without God's grace and help.
That's right.
So I don't know. I feel convicted and stricken and scared in reading all of this today. That's where I am.
Oh, beautifully put. I have a sense that you're speaking for all of us. We all have different particulars, but I think you're speaking for all of us. And I think you also really name well what the disciples came to. You remember that spot, I can't give you chapter and verse right now, but where the disciples turned to Jesus and basically said, this all sounds great, but who the hell can do it? We can't. And remember that? And Jesus said, what does Jesus say? He's like, you're right. For mortals, it is impossible. You're right. But for God, all things are possible, which is what I heard you saying there at the end. But for the grace, and I would add sort of participation of God in my efforts to do all of this, it is impossible. Which is finally, I think, the conclusion of the Apostle Paul. And God finally says it. No, I'm not going to make you perfect. My grace is sufficient for you. So one of the shifts that I think makes the Sermon on the Mount so exciting to me, and these teachings exciting as opposed to depressing, because I'm like you, I can't do them either. I got irritated this morning already with the people at one of my children's schools. So, I mean, I think I'm the spouse of a teacher. I think I'm supposed to not get irritated. Anyway, we're all human, right? But it's an adventure to me that's exciting because we're not a part of a belonging system. We're not a part of a rewards punishment system. That's Christianity's great mistake. We're a part of a transformation system. So that makes this an adventure to me because it's like, no, I cannot love people who are hard to love. But if my life's call is to try to, and it's okay to, like you're saying so beautifully, Harriet, never get it right, then I'm all in. Because that's fun work, That's fun. I have a person who is a teacher to me who's in integral theory and spiral dynamics is a guy named Jeff Salzman. And he's so helpful and playful, and he holds things so lightly. He's got a podcast called The Daily Evolver that is just so helpful. And he's such a sweet guy. And one of his practices is to watch news channels that he fundamentally disagrees with. So if you're into Fox, then he's like, I watch MSNBC. If you're into MSNBC, then he's like, let's watch Newsmax together, right? I mean, like, pick whatever. And he does it with this intention, this adventurous intention of not getting wrapped around the axle about their views on the issues. He just is like, I'm not going there. He does it because he wants to try to cultivate compassion and love in his body for the people on the television screen, who are kind of archetypes of the polar opposite of his view. Does that kind of make sense? And what an exercise. I just adore that. I think it's brave and beautiful and frankly mature. And it's kind of what Jesus is, I think, talking about in Love Your Enemies. What I love is verse 46. If you love those who love you, big deal. I want you to try to work on loving people who you totally differ with and who don't even like you. And it's okay to fail.
I mean, Henry, you could do a whole series on love, because I think and I think here Kathy and I relate to this, is this romantic hallmarky kind of sappy stuff. When I don't feel that way, therefore I'm not loving, I get into that bad cycle of, well, I'm wrong, right? And I'm going to hell.
Yeah.
I mean, what is love really? I mean, what's the Bible really mean by love?
Yeah.
I think it's so much deeper, so much broader. It's like I'm going to throw that word out of my vocabulary because it's so narrow, so wrong, so human, so Jim, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that occurs to me, Jim, as you share so well, is one of the things that our tradition teaches us about love is that love is one of the chief characteristics of love is a desire to understand what it is to be in the shoes of the other. What is it? So if I love an alcoholic, one of the first things the 12-step community teaches me is that alcoholic has a disease and that they don't want to be that way. Well, you got to be willing to be understanding to go down that road.
What did you say about curiosity a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, there's
a move to be more curious.
Yeah, so there's a shift. I mean,
somewhere in there's that.
Exactly. One of the things that happens in the transformation system that is the way of Jesus, Christianity as we practice it, is that along the way we shift from this sort of knee-jerk critical stance, finger pointing, why do you believe that way, Jim Clifton? Darn it! And the shift is, and it's all grace, to Harriet's point, it's a gift from God. It's not something I can sort of effort on my own. I can be vulnerable to it. The shift is to curiosity, and to where my knee-jerk is, oh man, Jim Clifton, why do you believe that way? Does that make sense? So I'm no longer pointing my finger. My mind has shifted down into my heart. My heart is a cognitive organ, and now I authentically am curious. Jim, tell me your story. Remind me, where were you born? Who are your people? How were you raised? What was your religious upbringing or lack thereof? Tell me how you came to believe the way you do. And then what almost always happens is Jim's like, oh, cool, somebody's finally asking me about my life. I'm kind of wondering these same questions. Let me try to articulate it. And then he'll say to me, well, Henry, how did you come to believe? Are you from Georgia? Was it Georgia or Mississippi? Where are you from again? Who raised you? Who are your people? What was your upbringing?
It feels like a definition of love I can understand.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. Maybe love is being curious about my neighbors, like genuinely, compassionately, which is articulated, Jim, in the baptismal covenant. So when we look at what happens after values is process and integration. The way we integrate the value of enemy love is articulated in the baptismal covenant when we say respect the dignity of every human being. And we remember that respect means what? Look again. So I take the first glance at Jim Clifton and I'm just critical because he does not vote the way I vote. What's wrong with you? But darn it, I'm a Christian and I'm a baptized Episcopalian, darn it. So I got to go back to that promise. And somebody said, well, Henry, remember you promised to respect the dignity of Jim Clifton. And you remember respect means look again. So I think you need to give him a shout and y'all go walking and you have another go at it, you know? And then you soften and get curious.
Sometimes when I think about, it helps me when I think about verse 46, for if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? I think about, it's easy for me to look back and say, is this transactional? You know, are you loving this person because I expect something back? That's somehow easy for me to look at myself and say, are you just trying to be transactional? Expect to get something. Guess that's what Harriet talked about, the conditional love.
Yeah.
Well, you know, with my child or children, there is definitely something I get. And out of them doing what I want them to do, I feel safe. I feel if they behave well, it makes me look good.
Yeah.
I get the false sense of security that they'll take care of me in my old age. I mean, there are all kinds of things that I get out of something that looks so kind of pure, you know, my children. But the fact is, I can't depend on that for my safety or security or approval or whatever it is. I can only depend on God for these things. And, you know, to me, it's like all of these dependencies have to be stripped away to, so if I can't do any of this, what is left? It's just this complete, utter surrender to dependence on God for everything. I mean, the only reason we murder people is because of fear, wanting more, you know, holding on to what we have, or, you know, the only reason we commit adultery is, you know, we want more of something. We want to feel safe or less afraid or whatever. All of these things are where we've replaced God with something else. And I have done it with my child. I've done it with my job. I've done it with my stuff, you know, and it doesn't work.
Well put. So Kathy, I think we can shift to asking ourselves if anything emerges for us in chapter 6, 1-8, where Jesus really continues the theme of enemy love, or one of the themes of enemy love, in as much as he's talking about giving without attachment, like give in such a way that you acknowledge there's nothing in it for you, right? This is not about you. And pray in the same way. What emerges for you all in that next section, that verses 1-8 of chapter 6, concerning almsgiving and concerning prayer, is the way they're labeled in my translation.
It's kind of funny, but it makes me the almsgiving one. It makes me think. I've been rewatching King of Queens, that sitcom from the early 2000s. I love that show. And there's an episode where
That's
the
great.
main characters get in trouble for making a donation to a school. They're trying to raise money for a library, and it accidentally gets put down for the wrong amount, and they ended up naming the library after them, even though they only donated like $50.
Yeah.
And so that there's their reward, you know. And so it kind of makes me think of that. It makes me want to, you know, always put anonymous, you know, for gifts.
Yeah. Oh, that's a funny example. That's great.
I just thought. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sure. I remember a sermon that Elise Johnson gave at Good Shepherd years ago, where she was talking about this wonderful woman who she wasn't criticizing in any way. This woman, she always carried quarters with her downtown in Lexington, and whenever she saw expired meters or meters that were about to expire, she would always put 50 cents in them or something, you know, put quarters in there. And she was with Elise one day, as I recall, and she, you know, told Elise that she does this. And Elise thought at the time, she's like, that's so wonderful. It's so nice. You know, this is nice, such a nice woman, which she was. Again, Elise wasn't being critical of the woman at all. But then she started to reflect on it later, and she started thinking, and she's like, you know, by her telling us, you know, by her telling people that she's doing this, is she then getting this sort of acclamation in the world? Is she getting her reward on earth, forfeiting a reward in heaven, kind of thing? I think it was just sort of a, you know, sort of philosophical or intellectual kind of exercise to sort of wonder, like, you know, how secret should we be about our good works? Should we literally tell no one? Should we really keep them guarded secret? Is it okay to tell, you know, our friend we're walking with why, you know, that we just put a quarter in the meter that we passed, or should we really keep those things to ourselves completely?
You know,
yeah, I always remembered that.
That's great. Thank you, Tracy. Yeah.
I feel like it can go sort of too far. I remember a friend of mine who did a lot of nice things, being worried that because doing the nice things made them feel good, they felt good when they did it, then they thought that was sort of just rewarding themselves, so then it didn't count as sort of a good deed. But I think one could get too introspective and end up not doing it because you're worried it's not pure enough or something.
Yeah. Harriet, what were you going to say?
The argument of teaching or showing the next generation. So I had a conversation with a friend and saying I was self-conscious there for a while when the offering plate came along, and I didn't put sign in each week, even though, you know, I was giving quarterly or whatever. And I said I came to realize that, and through some of these passages, that was perfectly fine. And he said, you know, that's good. That's a good point. He said, I make a note of putting it in every day, so I'm teaching others to give.
I've done some fundraising, and there's a reason why you see people's names where they, you know, put people's names who have donated, because it does encourage other people to give. And I mean, on some levels, it's a little bit competitive or whatever, but we've had people who said, you know, I don't want my name up there, and because I don't want to, you know, look, you know, prideful, but where we have said, no, this will, if your name is up there, it will help us raise more money. And it's absolute truth. So I think this, I know just watching the nightly news when they have the feel good thing at the very end after you're ready to kill yourself over how horrible everything is, you know, the feel good thing makes me want to go out and do good things. Right. So I don't think that was Jesus's intent here. I think he was, you know, really talking about people that were doing this just for the strokes. I think we take it too far when we say, well, we can't let anybody see us do anything good. No, I think it's good for us to had this sort of collective experience of charity and charitable works and gifts. And it's just, he was talking more about their hearts and what their intent was. And if your intent is good, I don't think it matters whether your name's on something or not, or whether people see you do it or not.
That really resonates with me, Harriet. Of course, you're spot on. You've been doing this longer than I have. On the fundraising piece, givers attract givers. That is just an absolute truth. If I know that Harriet and Nancy and Jim and Thomas are in, then I love those people. I'm in. What are they giving? I'm in. Absolutely. And in that way, Jesus sort of speaks to this when he says, "Let your works be seen, that God may be glorified." I mean, that's a direct quote to your point, Harriet. I love what you're saying. I think he's talking about, Hendry, is your ego running the show? Do you need attaboys, or is giving a part of a spiritual journey? If giving is a part of a spiritual journey, then keep at it. I'm 45 years old, and a lot of my peers don't give money to anybody. And so they need to see that I give money so that they can get curious. Like, you give to the church? Yeah. Why? And then we get to talk about giving as a spiritual journey, right? So are you being egoically driven or evangelically driven, we might say? Amy.
I think there's a significant impact too when those that you share those things with are those that you do life with. Like those who you're regularly walking beside. Because I think for me, like, I'm deeply challenged when I hear what someone I love and trust and I know their life, when I hear about the kind of sacrifices and choices that they're making, and it's shared not on a stage, but just between us. Like, then I'm deeply challenged, well, what am I doing myself? Like, oh, there's a lack of that. That's really beautiful in them, and it challenges me. I don't think it has to be that's more holy in some way. It just, I think for me, it has more impact when it's shared, just between people who I know well and do life with.
And there's, obviously, we just read that don't hide your light under a bushel thing. So it's tricky for me because I certainly can see you shouldn't do it just for vanity and have trumpets going before you sort of image. But on the other hand, I really see a lot of good people, like people I could shepherd, I think sometimes being too circumspect about their goodness or about good beliefs that they have, or they're afraid of imposing beliefs on others. Or I guess I think an open, honest approach is maybe better than feeling you need to hide it, because hiding has its own negative places it can lead to.
Ironic piety.
Really well put, Marilla. Marilla, what you take me back to is verse 1 of the first verse of chapter 6. Like, let's parse this out. Jesus says, "Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them." So he doesn't say, don't practice your piety before others. He says, don't practice your piety before others in order to be seen by them. So it really is, and this is Levine's point too, we really could argue it's about motivation.
And then she goes into that really wonderful
tell us.
Description of the levels of charity that were written by a Jewish teacher. I think she said like 1200.
Yeah.
I mean, that just, it's real. I think it's really worthwhile to think about those levels and where I am in those levels. And then, of course, I'm a longtime church treasurer, so I'm interested in that stuff. But then I think what's interesting too to me is how she describes the system at the temple. From what I get, and I don't really know the details, but people gave to the temple, and then the people came to the temple who needed something. They came and got what they needed. But how different our systems of so-called charity are today, and what the church's role in that. I think these levels can really apply to the church as well, and the ministries of the church, because it's sometimes we do things in the name of our church, or we start a ministry. I mean, I don't know about your church, but I know at my church we start things and then, you question why as a church we're doing these things in the way we're doing them.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought the 7 approaches up too, because I kind of am compelled by a sort of a multifaceted, or like, to use a fitness analogy, a cross-training approach to giving. Like, sometimes give anonymously, sometimes give so your name will be on the pledge record so people will know, if Harriet and Hendry are pledging, well, I should look into that, And there's lots of other different ways. Kathy, you and I did church business for a long time together, for a dozen years, and this didn't happen to us a lot, but every now and then we'd get an anonymous gift that was significant, that really helped us. We had this little church in McMinn County in East Tennessee, and it really broke our hearts open, didn't it? Or it did mine. And you're just like, what? And in a sort of a way, that's so important, because that inspires me and builds me up. Now, I also want people to know I pledge, so you sort of speak out of both sides of your mouth. Every now and then, give something anonymous, because that's awesome too. There's such powerful grace in that. So I love a both and with all of this.
But I think the church does it. I'm not, always like rah-rah church, what the church is doing, but I think the way the church, I think basically you probably do the same thing. People make pledges, and basically their gifts are anonymous. I mean, certain people know what people give, but the church doesn't.
Good point.
Doesn't publish lists of what levels of giving.
Right.
So I think that the church handles that, pretty well. People go to a church and they don't really know what other people give.
Yeah. And circling back to Tracy's example, I can go both ways with Tracy's example. And I love it. I love your example, Tracy, because it's kind of a cone, right? There's a parable. There's no answer necessarily to it. It's just something that invites us to reflect. So on the one hand, it's so sweet if that's kept secret, what the woman's doing with the meter maid deal. But on the other hand, it's also inspiring, because I might be like, oh, I never thought about that, but that'd be so easy for me. I'm always downtown, and I always have change in my ashtray there, and so I could do that too. So I can go sort of both ways with that, for sure. Well, I've got to run in just a minute, but any last thoughts on this piece? We might pick up with this next time. Father Thomas Keating cites the second part of today's reading from chapter 6 as the scriptural source for centering prayer and a basis for Christian meditation. Go into your inner room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And his exegetical point is that it's a metaphor because nobody had an inner room. A lot of these folks lived in one-room dwellings. So the inner room is the inner room of your own heart in 6 and 6.
But then I thought it was really cool. She talked about that there's a place for public prayer as well. That in the Jewish tradition, they have public prayer so that people who are mourning will not be alone. What a great
juxtaposition.
A great idea.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. And again, it's about motivation, isn't it? We need to have public prayer. We need to have prayers said out loud. And there's a big, maybe we pick up with this next time. Verse 8, Jesus says something really huge here about intercessory prayer. There has implications for intercessory prayer. Your Father knows what you need before you ask him. So some teachers have said, and I think this is very compelling, don't take it too rigid, but just play with it. Father Rohr says this, how much time do we spend telling God things about ourselves that God already knows? Jim Finley will say, in the voice of God, he's like, oh gosh, thank you for telling me about Aunt Ethel's surgery. I had no idea that she was having again, it's wonderful to pray for Aunt Ethel, and I do. I'm a priest. Intercessory prayer is a big part of my personal rhythm. But I love this sort of reminder, like, God knows about Aunt Ethel and knew about it well before you did. So then so it's not like don't pray for her, but what implication does that have for the way I hold Aunt Ethel in my heart, you know? Just sort of reshapes it. All right. Well, so y'all want to pick up with prayer next time and then go into the next piece also that's on our schedule. Sorry I got to run on you a little bit early today, but I hope you have a great day. Peace. God bless you. Bye.